What's going on YouTube? Today we're going to be talking about two companies, that are part of the Mag 7. And I think it's important to talk about these two companies, especially considering the situation we find ourselves in regards to these tariffs. As you know, one country is being hit harder than all of the others, with that being China, with additional tariffs being placed on them at the recording of this video, totaling up to 104% tariffs. So, with that being said, I want to talk about these two companies in regards to their exposure to China via supply chain and other things because I think as a long term investor, it's important to know about. It's important to take into account, when you're looking to buy these assets, when you're looking at dollar cost average into these assets, when you're looking to, kind of see can some of these stocks be driven further down? If a company that's on your watch list or a company that you're thinking about buying into has a ton of exposure to China, and we have looming, escalating tariff tensions between the United States and China, that may be a company that you want to put a little more thought into, or that you may want to, kind of sit back and monitor and not just, jump into, because it's something that as long as these tensions are continuing, these companies' stock prices could continue to be driven down. Now, there's two companies that I want to talk about are Amazon and Apple. Now, Amazon, when we're talking about Amazon, we're talking about their e-commerce business segment. How are they affected? How do they have exposure to China? Two reasons. One, 50% of Amazon's top sellers as of 2024 were China based. 45% based over here in the United States. The other 5% coming from Canada and somewhere else. But over half of the top e-commerce sellers on Amazon are from China. Number two, 70% as of 2024, 70% of all of the goods and products sold on Amazon are produced in China. That's the double whammy. When you're talking about tariffs placed on Chinese imports, that could have serious implications for Amazon, their bottom line, the sellers, the consumers. Let's talk about why, the implications. Increased operational cost. With As a result of these tariffs, being placed on Chinese imports, it's estimated that Amazon could face up to $10 billion in profit reductions due to these tariffs. Impacts on third-party sellers. The increased tariffs may compel these sellers to raise prices or seek alternative supply sources. And finally, you know, increased prices for consumers. You cannot expect the sellers to absorb all of the additional costs put on by these tariffs. Those additional costs will eventually get pushed on to the consumers. That's essentially what a tariff is. It's a tax on consumers. The more you consume, the more you will feel the tariffs, and it's a snowball effect. Amazon's going to feel it, the sellers are going to feel it, and the consumers are going to feel it. Now, on to Apple. When we're talking about Apple, their biggest blunder when it comes to this tariff situation in regards to China is the fact that China pretty much dominates Apple's manufacturing. You know, they have two factories over there in China, Foxconn, Pegatron, that Apple relies on to assemble iPhones, iPads, and Macs. So that's not good whenever you're talking about tariffs. Now, Apple is looking to pivot. They're looking to pivot. They're looking to shift some of their production over to India and Vietnam. We'll see if they can make that happen. They've sought exemptions, from some of these tariffs. These tariffs taking the manufacturing cost of their phones from $580 to an estimated $850 per unit, which would drive the price of their phones up. We've seen Trump talk about, The fact that he believes iPhones can be made over here in America, but we know that will result in a significant price increase in regards to the iPhones, iPads, Macs, and any other Apple products for that matter. But Apple is in the middle of trying to, move some of that supply chain to India, to Vietnam. They're trying to pivot. We'll have to see. Apple's one of the companies on my watch list. I like Apple under $150. But, you know, we'll just have to see. Apple is one of those companies, they have not been innovating. So that's already hurting them there. And then you add on the tariffs. You really don't want to be raising the price of your products while not innovating, while, having to probably absorb some of those costs because you don't just want to drive the price of your products up because you do have competitors in the market. So we'll see. Amazon's going to feel it. Apple's going to feel it as long as these tariffs remain intact, as long as tensions continue to be prolonged between U.S. and China in regards to the tariffs. As long as the stubbornness continues, you can expect Apple and Amazon to be, under the fire. Now, we have Q1 earnings coming up. If this continues, which let me just say this, I think that in regards to a lot of the other countries, a lot of this tariff stuff could be possibly wrapped up in the next 60 to 90 days. Now with China, I don't know. China is that's the variable, that's the audible, that's the oddball. We'll just have to see how long that lasts because 104% is insane. I don't even think we'll be having this conversation, but we are. So anything's on the table at this point with the Trump administration in regards to these tariffs. He wants free trade. He wants fair trade. So we'll see what happens. But in the meantime, our U.S. companies, our Mag 7 companies will fill it. Another, good fact to know is that 50% of the Mag 7's earnings come from abroad. So 41, I think it's 41% of the S&P 500's earnings come from abroad. So a lot of our top companies have exposure abroad, have exposure to China. But, in regards to this video, Amazon, Apple, they do have that exposure. They will be affected. And, we'll see how they pivot. We'll see how they move. If this continues on into their Q1 earnings, we'll see how these companies, talk about this in regards to their guidance. And, we'll just see how it goes. But I want to put that on you guys' mind, because it's definitely something I'm thinking about when it comes to, buying into these companies, dollar cost average into these companies, and just something to think about. Thank you guys for tuning in. Please like, share, and subscribe if you got any value from this video. I love y'all, man. See y'all later.